For our first panel today, I'd like to welcome Carrie Charles, the CEO of Broadstaff. Carrie's going to be moderating this session where she'll be leading a discussion around strategies to attract and retain talent. So thanks, Carrie. Go on ahead.
All right, welcome. Today is International Women's Day, and we are here celebrating the innovations and contributions of women in telecommunications. Now, I might say telco sometimes, and sometimes I might say telecom, because in different parts of the world, we just say it differently. So it's going to be a little bit a mix of each. So we want to champion the achievements of women. And we also want to discover how to attract and retain more talent in the workforce that is female. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I have with me 4 accomplished telco leaders, and I'm excited to introduce them to you. First, I have Carolina Milanesi, and she is the founder of the Heart of Tech, and you'll be hearing more from her in just a moment. Then we have Heather Campbell, the Vice President of National Access Networks Engineering at Rogers Communications, and Kelly Brewer is the Vice President at Crown Castle. And then Nicole Thomas is the Regional Vice President of the Central Region for Dish Network. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. Super excited about this conversation.
Thank you so much for moderating the conversation.
Well, let's have some fun. And hopefully what we want to achieve here is we want the audience to walk away with some actionable strategies and some ideas that are gonna spark innovation, something in the future, something that's going to really make our industry a better place. So what I wanted to start with is this idea of a pipeline, because many leaders say that our issue with attracting and retaining more women in telco is a pipeline problem. Mm-hmm. And then other leaders say that that's a myth. So what are your thoughts around this? Is it that we're facing tougher competition out there, or maybe the demand for digital skills has really skyrocketed and women don't have these skills? I mean, what are your thoughts? So Nicole, start us off.
Sure, Carrie, and happy International Women's Day. So yeah, pipeline competition is fierce. I think really there's 2 parts to that. One is that more and more companies have a diversity and inclusion, strategy. And so there is, there's metrics and goals that they're trying to achieve. And so they're competing for women. So that makes it, a bit challenging when you're trying to attract women to your company. The other piece is, there is a pipeline problem with women, especially getting to their first roles in management, something that we're very passionate about. Oftentimes they just don't have that opportunity because they've stepped out of the workplace, or, they need sponsorship, not mentorship. They need sponsorship, which is very different than mentorship, right? It's about people saying your name in rooms you're not in. And so that becomes really, really challenging. I think for our industry, right, it's amazing because it's a little bit of real estate, construction, engineering, but we're also very tech forward, right? And I almost think that we need to have a bit of a branding strategy around being more tech forward. And I think that will help, attract women who are in, STEM. We've done a great job of looking at women that are, IDLE certified or, Scrum Masters, people that are just not the traditional candidate. And that really helps build the pipeline, especially in a world where we need more digital skills.
Right.
One other thing, Nicole, like to kind of touch on that, I feel like awareness, you mentioned branding, but one of the things in my conversations, whether it's male or female, most people are accidental telecom leaders. So, just an awareness of telecom and that it's an interesting career field, and that, to your point, there are a lot of pathways, whether it's tech or engineering or real estate or project management, but that's not always well known through kind of the traditional pipeline tools or avenues like universities and things like that. So I think building some awareness earlier in the pipeline will actually help bring those candidates along.
It's interesting, though, that when we talk about pipeline, I love where Nicole started, which is in the workplace, and then kind of circle back to school and education, because I feel sometimes, you know, you were saying, Carrie, about the ones that are pro or against and talk about myth. Well, I think sometimes the pipeline is being used as an excuse, right? It is like throwing the ball down the street and say, well, it's not my problem, is there are not enough women and girls that are interested in tech or engineering or math or whatever the case might be. And that is actually not true. If you're looking at younger ed, there are plenty of girls that are into robotics, that are into math. As they get older, they're discouraged. They're not championed as much. As they get even older and they get to university and college is where you start to look at where you can have a career. And if you don't see people like yourself, which is, you know, where Nicole was starting, is in the workplace, is creating a pipeline for growth within the telco industry so that women can see success within the industry.
So quickly, can we just go around and quickly just say how you started in telco and maybe what position that you held first and just quickly. So Carolina, can you start?
Well, I'm a cheat because I'm not actually in telco, right? I watch telco. So I'm an analyst in tech, and I've been following the industry for a very long time, since Nokia was still the smartphone leader in the market. So a long time.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And no, we need you, Carolina. We need to know what's going on in the future. So thank God you're here. Kelly, you have a very interesting background.
Sure. Well, I always knew I wanted to be in construction and ideally have a technical background or go into a technical field in construction. But I was also an entrepreneur at heart. So I was working in a traditional construction, like civil construction industry. And then I met my husband there and decided I really wanted to pursue more of an entrepreneurial kind of tech startup. And I joined a smaller startup firm, and it was focused around telecom. And so that's kind of how I got there. It was the intersection of construction, tech, and this startup environment. And that was like really attractive to me. And so I spent 11 years there before I moved over to Crown.
Yes, you did. That's awesome. Heather.
I graduated in engineering, and I co-opted at Nextel. And I guess I liked being in RF engineering so much that I ended up going to work at Nextel, and I was a performance engineer in the field, and that was my first role at Nextel, and ended up as a performance engineer, and then as a regional engineer, and working my way up. So my first role was a performance engineer in the field.
Wow, that's awesome. Nicole, what about you?
I love that Kelly asked this question. This is always my favorite phrase. I actually started in the industry when I was 19 as a project coordinator. So I started building the original Sprint network out on the West Coast. It took me 2 weeks to even figure out what the company was doing. So it was really interesting, but from there, my journey progressed. But, you know, at heart, I'm kind of the project manager, project coordinator in my everyday life.
So, and myself, I was one of those people that fell into telecom. This opportunity with Broadstaff was brought to me 6 years ago. And then I grew the company, and here we are today. So Broadstaff is a staffing firm in telecom specifically. So we provide the people for all of this great work to be done. So thank you for that context. And I think that makes a difference as we continue this conversation. Now, what we want to know is how to attract and retain more women in telecom. But let's talk about strategies. Do you have any ideas, like the real stuff that people can walk away with right now? So Heather, can you start us off?
So for me, you know, there's an adage, you know, do what you say you're going to do, you know, and I'll adjust that here to say, be the team that you would want to work with. because word gets around. It comes around to say, they look like they're having fun, so I want to go work there, right? They look like they're doing cool stuff, so I want to go work in that team. And the industry is big, but the industry is really small. And what really attracts people to your organization is, I really want to go be, and I really want to go be with that team because they're doing really great stuff. So at Rogers, we've really aimed to create a culture of flexibility and inclusion, especially during the pandemic. And we're seeing that talent has really been asking for those flexibility elements to be through and remain afterward. We've been transitioning to a hybrid work model where we can mix the best of, in-person collaboration, which we found that everyone really wants to keep, as well as the remote work. And that maintains the flexibility that everyone has been looking for. But also, but in order to retain talent, it's making sure that you're keeping that team environment and you're treating people the way that they want to be treated, and giving them that team and collaboration environment, because that's really what everyone wants.
Mm-hmm.
I love where you started that, Heather, which is, if people understand why they are there, that is such a huge retention tool, right? I love this generation. They're so purpose driven, and so I realize that even, the people that have been in this industry for a really long time, that purpose is everything, right? And so constantly going back to the why, here's why we're doing what we're doing. Here's what we're serving. Here's how we're going to change the way the world communicates, I think is just such a powerful tool. And you see that, when you have enthusiasm around that and truly believe it, people will also believe that. And it just creates a wonderful culture.
Right.
And I think the other thing that Heather touched on is that authentic desire, right, to create a culture that is inclusive and equitable. And part of that, we all mentioned earlier, the importance of allyship, mentorship, and sponsorship all together, right? It's creating an environment where you make that sponsorship maybe a little bit more organized, where you incentivize and you educate managers on the power of sponsorship. So that helps you create that path for progression as well, right? With the people that you have, because everybody joins, yes, purpose is important and is a big driver, but you're also doing this because you're passionate about what you're doing. And at the same time, you might have a mortgage to pay, right? So you want to balance that. It's life, right? We want to do something that is fulfilling, that pays well. So addressing any pay gaps that you might have in your organization, and talk about that and talk about what your priorities are in creating that equitable space.
Mm-hmm. So one other thing that I think really helps with retention that we see in our industry is when there are female leaders in a company, then women can see themselves there. So they don't leave. And we have so many women that come to us as candidates and say, I don't see myself in progressing in this company. So I think that's also a key point. So one solution that I know that a lot of companies focus on is they focus on hiring women in entry and mid-level roles, and then promoting them to leadership. So what are some challenges specifically with this strategy that you see? Kelly, can you start us off?
Sure. Well, I think, first, women entering the workforce, whether it's an entry level or kind of mid-level career, there's different needs and that time horizon. And so I'll start with kind of the entry level. We talked a little bit earlier about just kind of the recruitment and the pipeline and just building awareness. I think one of the challenges from an entry level standpoint is that women coming out of, whether it be university or otherwise, don't always know or think about tech first. It's not something that's typically always talked about. Certainly wasn't on my radar when I was thinking about a male-dominated industry, and telecom wasn't even in my sights when I was thinking about what my career path might look like. And so I think talking about it more and starting earlier in that, and then too, just starting to use more modern tactics too, to start to engage. I always think about active recruiting, and it doesn't have to be just at the senior level. And so if we want the best talent and the best candidates, it's going to require not just women, but men and women in the workforce to engage those candidates directly before they choose other paths, and show them what that looks like. And the power of social media gives you a platform to engage a lot of people in different ways. I always have an always be recruiting, mentoring, sponsoring kind of engagement, particularly on social media, because I think it's really important. And I think that's a great way to get people in. And then once like women are in the workforce, when we talk about kind of that mid-level career, sometimes your lifestyle changes. Like women are thinking about families and having kids, and that starts to disrupt what may have been kind of their career trajectory. And I think it's not just the woman's responsibility, but also the company and the environment to find ways to make that work. And that, in my personal view, is that doesn't just happen by having like a women's support group. Like that wouldn't have been helpful for me as I had 2 kids, middle of my career. Like we need actual ways to be more flexible. And I think COVID has helped with that. You can see I'm working from home, so I got to drop my kids off, but we need to also be able to create workforce environments that are flexible, that support women who want to have a career and also be able to engage with their families so they don't leave. And that will help with kind of both the retention. And I would say, having that flexibility mid-career for me also was like a huge retention motivator, because I felt really, really, really supported in a time where I didn't want to have to choose. I wanted to have it all. I knew I'd have to have some, give up some things, but I got the flexibility and the support I needed.
Yeah. To that point, Kelly, it's so important. We have, to have organization-wide mentoring and coaching programs, because it's so extremely important that, women have access to safe places where they can ask questions, get advice, talk through scenarios. How would you handle this? What would you do in this situation? Because there's always someone that's been in that situation before, and that question could be easy to them, but yet would keep you up at night. And, sometimes those are things that we might not have had before, but we could easily help someone else out. And it just helping someone else out along the way is a way to pay it forward. And to me, that's always something that's actionable and is something that, that we can always pass along. But that helps to build the knowledge and the confidence, to go forward and be that next level candidate. And, to me, that builds that candidate pool.
Yeah. I also wonder if there's a time, because so much is changing around the way we work, and this is not limited to telco, but in more general terms, if we also need to reassess how we measure people and what is worth to an organization, so that we progress people differently. Because sometimes, especially if you come into an organization as a junior part of the team, and I speak for experience, my first analyst job was at Gartner, which is a brand that everybody recognizes in tech. And I entered in at the lowest level of an analyst, and I grew up to VP, but it took me 9 years. So, if you're doing it like that, first of all, it takes time. Second of all, from a pay perspective, when you grow internally, you don't grow as much as when you hired into a more middle or upper part of the workforce. So you never quite catch up from a financial perspective, which then has repercussions on what you can do. For instance, as Kelly was talking about children, right? If you decide to have kids, but you're not quite, financially, you don't have a disposable income that allows you to have childcare, what do you do? Then you need to start making choices. And we've seen a lot of women leave the workforce during COVID because they are the primary caregiver, right? We shouldn't be in that position.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about diversity in companies. What initiatives are you seeing inside of small, medium, and large companies that strengthen diversity and also improve diversity in the candidate pool? Nicole, can you start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk about when employees are actually in our company. We use Carrie at Broadstaff to help get employees into our organization. But once we're in there, we really focus on support. So like Kelly mentioned, we actually started an employee resource group called Women in Wireless. And really our whole goal is to raise the profiles and visibility of that women and give them the opportunity. And that helps a lot, right? Because a lot of times women go into organizations, especially at lower levels, and they're kind of hidden in the organization. If you want to be out there, we help create those opportunities to kind of push you out into the spotlight. And it doesn't need to be an employee resource group. It doesn't need to be as structured as that. There's tangible ways that you can do that no matter what size your company is, which is, highlight people in your newsletter, send an email recognizing somebody that did something really great. Those are really effective ways to just allow people to be out in front. And that can be life-changing. I go back to my experience, if people hadn't pushed me out in front and given me opportunities just to even speak at a meeting, I wouldn't have the career that I have. And so creating those opportunities for people is incredibly important.
Any other initiatives that you're seeing or what's working to create a more diverse candidate pool for companies?
I think I see a lot of companies being more mindful of, the little things, starting with what and this better than I do because you do it for a living, job posts, right? If I read something that doesn't speak to me and has a very gender focused, wording, I'm not inclined to apply. So being more gender neutral, but also neutral in general. We have to think about the next generation of kids that is coming up with the biggest number of non-binary association, right? They see themselves as a non-binary person. So yes, there's women, but there's also people that don't see themselves as a woman or a man. And we need to welcome them. We need to make them feel there is a place for them and they are seen for who they are. So I think that the opening door, if you like, into a company is the job description. And then is, yes, some of the activities that they do. But, a lot of time it feels that some of those are performative. And so, yes, the women in something or, supporting International Women's Day. I'm sure we'll see a lot of hashtags going around today, right? But then you're going to go and see the boardroom, you're going to go and see the executive team, group, and there's no one there that looks like us. So I think that putting, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk by doing certain things. And I do think that when it comes to women in particular, returnship is important, is flexibility maybe in a more personal way. I love that. I think it was Telstra back in 2014, 2015. They started an initiative that was called flexible mindset, and the idea that not everybody wants flexibility in the same way, right? Some people might want to work a 4-day week. Some people might want to come in at 10 and leave at 3 so that they can pick up their kids from school. So be a bit more not one size fits all. And I know that sometimes, especially for a large organization, might not be that easy, but we've been through COVID. We've seen how flexible we can be and still be productive. So I'm sure that we can stretch a little bit and really look at what the different teams and the individuals actually need to be successful.
Carolina, you used the term authentic earlier about leadership style, but I also think that can apply to companies, particularly when you start to think about culture. And, when I think about like diversity and inclusion and, ESG initiatives, like I think it really starts to hang together when those concepts are reinforcing. And so you start to see women and minorities in different leadership roles. Your ESG strategy, your culture, and your mission all hang together. There's word choice that's deliberate, that is inclusive. And so those tiny actions all start to make up what your culture is, and that starts to shift and change. And that culture and how you portray it both internally and externally can be really, really powerful from both a recruitment and retention standpoint. And I think this is going to be a journey that a lot of companies are on. And honestly, one of the drivers of why I came to Crown is I could see this change happening, and it's exciting to be a part of. And playing a role in that, both from like a mission of building really cool infrastructure, is also like building the company that we want to be and creating the leadership teams that we want to work in and creating an environment that our employees are excited to be at. Like that's a really mission. That's a powerful mission I can get behind.
Mm-hmm. Carolina, I love what you said about starting with the job description, right? Because if you can see yourself within that job description, you're more apt to apply to it, right? And that's a subliminal thing, because if you're looking at that and you don't see that you could possibly be in that role, right? Because, studies have shown that men are more apt to apply to roles, even if they don't feel like they have all of the requirements, right? And women are more apt to go, I'm not too sure if I have those, so maybe I won't apply, especially if the wording in that job description may not just fit right. So, as we're thinking about the wording of the job description, that's so important to make sure that it is inclusive and that we're really thinking about everyone, right? Especially women applying, to that role. And then one of the things we look at is our leaders actually have scorecards, right? So putting it into their leadership metrics to say, how are you hiring? Do you have diversity in your hiring? Really makes people start to think, okay, when I'm filling out my job descriptions and when I'm looking at candidates, it really starts to push forward the needle versus just talking about it.
Yes. And leaders do need to take a stand for a diverse candidate pool and say, I'm not going to make my decision until I see a more diverse candidate pool. So let's move on to the next question, because we've got some audience questions as well that we want to get to, but this one goes hand in hand with someone in the audience, and that is, how can we make telco more appealing to women? And someone in the audience asked, it's no secret telecom leadership is male dominated, and nearly all of them got their start in the same way: a bucket truck, pulling cable, climbing towers. And this could be an artificial barrier holding women back. Do women need more encouragement to enter trades? And then, the bottom line is, how can we make telco more appealing to women? So Carolina, can you start us off?
I do think that we touched on this earlier, that there are two things that go hand in hand. One is that the industry has changed so much, right? Yes, telco and infrastructure is just one part of it, but we seem to be stuck on that, so that it is about pulling cables and doing that, and therefore we can discuss why women cannot do that, right? Some people think is a man's job, but clearly it's not. It's just that you choose to do what you feel more inclined to do. Bottom line is, though, that telco is tech. And I think that we're missing that connection. Yep. We are missing the connection between the infrastructure part, and then what telco actually enables in the middle of tech. And more importantly, we touched on this earlier, purpose. If you look at, we had so many instances from COVID to sadly, more recently, the war in Ukraine, that show you the power of telecommunications. But if you're looking more widely, telco is the cornerstone for all the big technologies that we're talking about: AI, the cloud, the metaverse that is coming. That is what we need to talk about. And it's not about marketing alone, right? We need to become better storytellers around the telco industry, not because we are playing smoke and mirrors, but because that is the reality. That is what telco does. And it's true. I mean, coming out of Mobile World Congress, it was hard to find, executives on panels and representing the big carriers. And of course, that has to change. But I think is really talking more about the different roles that are in telcos, and is a mix of technical, non-technical. That doesn't mean that you can only be in PR and HR, right? And a lot of times when you look at tech, right, go and find the woman. Well, she's either PR or HR. That's what it is, right? But semiconductor maybe is the only industry I can think of that has even more of a problem that telco does. So I think that's what it is. I really think that is pushing the purpose, how life-changing, and the impact on society that telcos have in all the shape and forms that it comes in, that will appeal not just to women, but it will appeal to the younger generation, that very different from my generation, where you went to work because you were collecting a paycheck because you needed to work, are driven more by purpose. Yes, they knew, they need to make a living, but they want to make a difference while they're making a living.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Carolina. I mean, think back to, the networks we built, 3G and 4G, we built the app community, which changed our lives, right? And now we're building something new. And so just, having people embrace that, what are the use cases going to be? It's a little fuzzy. Sometimes I have a hard time kind of describing to my team. We're building a cloud native O-RAN network, which has never been done before. And I still struggle with telling my teams, this is what this is going to mean. But I think the more that people educate themselves in the upcoming technologies, the more valuable they're going to be in the future, right? And so just making sure that people understand that.
So looking from the past, we've talked a little about where we've come from, right? The present, and then the future of telecom. And again, we've talked a little bit about this, but I want to go deeper here because I think there's a bigger message that we can find that also has some solutions inside of it. So how do we communicate the image of telco to today's candidates in a way where they get excited about it, right? So Kelly, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, we've talked a bit about mission, and I think that's really important. Having an external mission of what your company is going to accomplish and making that an exciting and motivating reason to join is going to be important. But I also think about the internal mission too, and that can be just as important as why are people joining this company? What are you trying to do inside the company to create that change in that environment? And so again, I think there's a bunch of different tools that are also like more modern that can help kind of communicate that across. We've talked a bit about social media, but that is a platform that's here to stay, and it has a bunch of different avenues that connect with different people across the globe and in different cohorts. And I think that leveraging that to start to communicate about brand, personal brand, about company brand, and then also connecting those dots between, what the mission is, what you can expect, so that employees that are coming into either telecom or your company start to have the same feeling. It doesn't feel like an initiative. D&I is not an initiative, or ESG initiatives are not just initiatives. that whatever you're portraying and the things that you're working on are connected to your mission, and that you're using your communication platforms to make it feel really authentic, because it is. Like, it just has to be the same message, both internally and externally, so that it really resonates, so that when employees come into the organization, it doesn't just feel like something that is put on for show. It starts to really change the DNA of the company. And, you know, innovation is like a buzzword that people talk about, but I think innovation is one of those really cool concepts where I think people want to work for a company that wants to change or be part of the change. And innovation can happen in all kinds of ways, big, flashy, new technology, but also there's like just the innovation in the way we work and how we do things, which is going to require telecom companies to have more modern tools, create new processes, way to engage across different diverse candidate pools once they're even inside the company. And so thinking about what tools and what innovation means to your company and incorporating that into the message, I think is going to be really important too, as we start to attract new talent. And if we want to change the narrative into we're a tech type sector, we need to start talking about innovation.
I love that we continue to circle back to that authentic part. You know, Kelly saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just an initiative. As music to my ears. That's what I say to all the customers that I engage with from the Heart of Tech, is that is a business pillar, right? In the same way as you're thinking about technical innovation, the same way you're thinking about your financial situation, and you have a chief financial officer, you have a CIO, you have a CDO, and the work is never done, you know, and it should be both from a culture perspective, but also from a product line. You need to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that as we're talking about telcos, you know, connecting the unconnected is a huge drive today. And we know how much driving that and closing the digital divide is absolutely critical. And so, you know, we go back to purpose. So it feels like, you know, we touched on so many aspects of what the telco industry can do today that should be appealing to people, but I don't know if we talk about it enough.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We have 5 minutes left and we have some awesome questions. So I'm going to go through these questions, and if we could just quickly maybe give shorter answers so we can get through them. But we've talked a little bit about this in terms of recruitment to improve diverse representation. Where do we start? Do we start at the top in the boardroom, or entrance rising through the ranks? So what are your thoughts quickly?
To me, it's about that middle manager. Honestly, that's something that I'm just super focused on. I think if we can get more women into leadership positions, this industry will change over the next 5 years.
I think the culture is driven from the top, and so having some women in the top leadership positions will certainly help. But most of my advocates and sponsors have been men, and frankly, this change doesn't happen if we don't bring them with us. And so I think that's an important part of that conversation. So,
yes.
Yeah. But it is about representation. If you can see it, you can believe it. If you believe it, you can do it, right? And so, I think candidates need to see that it's possible, and that makes it appealing. And so the more women, the more that they can see it. And so, but Kelly's right. It is about sponsors, and the majority of our sponsors have been men. And so we thank them and we appreciate it, but we do need to increase the representation, because the more that they see of us, the more that they know that it's possible.
Yes. Okay, 4 minutes. And this is a great question. Would like to know, what are the 3 qualities you would suggest to help us get into leadership positions from the engineering production side? So what are your thoughts? We've got 3 minutes.
I'll go first. My quick 3. Be able to create and paint a vision of what could be for your team. Having a strong business acumen, even if you come from the tech side, understanding how that connects to the business. You are running a business, and if you're in a leadership position, you're expected to drive that forward. and your ability to connect and build a team. If you're in a leadership position, that is how you're going to continue to grow your business. So
let's all answer this. That was awesome, Kelly. That was amazing. And let's all answer it, because I think each one of us has some gold here to pass on to young people in our industry. So again, what are 3 qualities you would suggest to help us get into leadership positions? And let's just say in general, sorry, Kelly, didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just so excited. Who wants to go next? You did a great job. I was just like, yeah. Who wants to go next?
I'll go quickly. I think the biggest one is be coachable and take feedback really well. I think a relationship with your manager, and sometimes we don't have great managers, is really, really important. Make sure that the organization knows exactly where you want to go. I can't tell you how many conversations that I have with women on a daily basis, and they say, well, I don't know what I want to do next. Like, can't you just tell me? Own your career, have a great relationship with your manager, as best you can, and just give feedback and take feedback really well, because that's how you go.
Beautiful. 2 more minutes. Heather, what are your thoughts?
So I would say, when you're explain why something is needed, what problem it solves, the money it saves, and how it can be used, and really how to tell a story very succinctly, and be able to portray that. One of the things that I've found is an analysis. People, engineers want to give you their data and give you an analysis, and it's 15 slides of a bunch of data. As soon as you're able to get it very concise and very clean with a story and a message, that's really the answer.
Excellent. Carolina, let's finish it up. Take us home.
I have a companion to go with the owning your career. It is really claim your space, right? Don't be apologetic about being where you are, and more so where you want to go. You deserve it. You're going to work for it, and you're going to own it. So don't pretend to be less smart, not to be intimidating, don't lower your voice, not to come across as bossy. Just be who you are and own it.
I love that. Now, we have some other questions that are phenomenal. We don't have time to get to them all. And I would say to you, if you have a question, please just find us on LinkedIn, and you can ask us all questions. We're there for you. And I want to thank you so much for your participation today in this panel and the audience. This has been fantastic. So back to you, Catherine.
Wow. What a great conversation. I loved all of that. So thank you all so much. It really touched on several things we're going to talk about more today, like the pipeline, the pay gap, sponsorship, mentorship. So it was a great way to really, kind of begin everything. So again, thank you. And next you're going to hear from another panel of experts about the importance of STEM education, something you all talked about a little bit today, and how that will help build a foundation for a more diverse workplace. So see you there.
Thank you.